And good morning once again from Mission Control Houston, and welcome to our continuing coverage of the Soyuz MS-16's trip to the International Space Station. 3 crew members are on board and closing the gap between themselves and the International Space Station. Everything proceeding smoothly for an on-time docking today. Those 3 crew members from left to right: NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy making his 3rd flight into space today. In the middle, the Soyuz commander and Russian cosmonaut Anatoli Ivanishin also on his 3rd visit. And then on the very right there is Ivan Vagner making his 1st flight, another Russian cosmonaut on board. As of this very moment, they are just about 8 kilometers away from the International Space Station, as both vehicles are flying over the South Pacific to the southeast of Australia. And right now they are about 273 statute miles in altitude. Soyuz, already inside of 8 kilometers away from the station. It's closing the gap between itself and the orbiting laboratory at a rate of about 11 meters per second. Everything has gone smoothly so far with all of our different burns, our delta velocity burns, 4 of those done to successfully raise the station's orbit following a successful launch earlier today. All the impulse burns, fine-tuning the path towards the station, also going according to plan. So that's our ground track. Right now they are in an orbital nighttime, but as you can see, as they continue to cross over the Pacific, we'll be getting into the orbital daytime, and we should get some good views of the Soyuz during docking. We're coming to you live now from another flight control room. If you watch launch, you might be noticing a change of scenery. We're now back down the hall in the International Space Station's usual flight control room, known as FICR 1, Flight Control Room 1. Again, this just part of some of the precautions we're taking here in Houston in Mission Control in the current COVID-19 environment. The different flight control teams are alternating rooms between what's known as handover, so minimizing any person-to-person contact, maintaining social distancing, and maintaining a healthy flight control team to continue flying this orbiting laboratory, as they're doing that 24 hours a day. Inside the room right now, the Orbit 2 team is led by Flight Director Pooja Jazrani. She's there at the bottom of your screen. Just above her, NASA astronaut Jessica Watkins, serving as the Capcom this morning. She's the voice between all the teams here in Houston and the crew on board the International Space Station. A couple of other key players in the room right now. One of them is the visiting vehicle officer, Tom Erkenswick. He's overseeing a team both here in Houston and in Moscow that has direct insight into the Soyuz systems and how it's been performing, and feeding that to the flight director and the entire control team here in Houston. Pooja has just finished polling the team, and they are go for this docking operation. There's a number of items that have to get done, a number of configurations that have to get done with the International Space Station before we do a docking. Everything from the Spartan flight controller today, configuring the solar arrays to make sure that they're not going to be moving around as they get into a docking attitude. That work being done by Will O'Connell over there at the Spartan position. And then things like the attitude control, so which way the station is actually pointing. Our ADCO today, James Reel, working to hand over that control from the usual U.S. control using large gyroscopes in the station structure over to the Russian segment, which can actually use its thrusters to help maintain attitude for the International Space Station. So at this point, all of that work is done. One of the last items we were waiting on was to acquire a TV signal from the Soyuz spacecraft itself, and we are starting to get that down now. We'll be able to bring you that view mixed in with this one with the International, or the Mission Control Moscow out in Koryov. They've been overseeing the mission ever since that successful launch earlier this morning. That was controlled initially from a blockhouse in Baikonur and handed over following that successful separation over down to Koryov. That launch was done successfully today. It was done right on time at 3:05 a.m. Central, 4:05 a.m. Eastern, 8:05 GMT. I'm going to try and throw in GMT as much as possible. Have been seen. We've got a lot of our international friends watching today, so I'll try and throw that in when possible so you can help track all of our milestones also. But again, that launch came right on time. And that was the roughly 9-minute ride into orbit on the Soyuz spacecraft. Again, this was the first flight of humans on the Soyuz 2.1A booster. This is an upgraded variant of the Soyuz with additional telemetry, so essentially data coming back from the vehicle, some upgrades to the launch escape system, which was used recently back in 2018 during the flight of Nick Hague and Alexei Ovchinin. This was the first time launching on that booster and also launching from Site 31 at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. It was a flawless ride uphill. The first stage, those 4 strap-on boosters firing for about the first 2 minutes before falling away in the core stage, continuing the climb into orbit. Again, this is the 3rd time into space for both Cassidy and Ivanishin. For Cassidy, this is his 2nd ride on the Soyuz spacecraft. His first ever flight was on Space Shuttle Endeavour on STS-127, also a mission to the International Space Station, but this time getting his 3rd trip into space. Again, it was a flawless flight into orbit for the Soyuz spacecraft, or for the Soyuz rocket. We got some occasional cabin views inside. This looking at Anatoli Ivanishin on the bottom of your screen. He's the Soyuz commander for all the operations today. And the top there, Ivan Vagner, who making his first flight into space. And this, just another view that we were able to get. This a camera right on the side of the Soyuz spacecraft. You were able to see that 3rd stage separate and fly away. And then shortly after one of the solar arrays, there are 2 of these on the Soyuz spacecraft that provide electrical power, deploying to begin gathering the sun's energy and supplying electricity to systems on board the spacecraft. That automated deployment also happening with the deployment of a number of different antennas used for navigation, and also the automated rendezvous coming up that we're going to see in just about under 40 minutes from now. So with the go from the team here in Houston, and we are right now about 38 minutes away from the expected docking time. I say expected because it's not unusual for the Soyuz to get there a little bit early. It is an automated rendezvous, so everything being flown by the Corps' automated rendezvous system on the Soyuz spacecraft. They were able to do checkouts of the active system on the Soyuz and the passive system on the Russian service module, also known as Zvezda, during the flight up to our current altitude. One of the major milestones we're going to be tracking now is the fly around. So right now the Soyuz is coming in pretty much right underneath the International Space Station. It's eventually going to get close to what's known as the R-bar, the radial vector, and then begin to swing its way up to its docking port, which is the Poisk module. You're looking at a model of the International Space Station. The Poisk module is that empty one just above Progress 74, where you see the MS-16 spacecraft is scheduled to dock. That's on the space-facing side, or the zenith side, of the Zvezda service module. And again, we're tracking that docking to take place on time at about 9:16 a.m. Central Time, 10:16 a.m. Eastern, or 14:16 GMT. And again, not unusual for the Soyuz to move through a couple of these steps a little bit quicker than normal. After they do the fly around, they'll initiate something known as station keeping. That's where they do their kind of final alignment checks for the vehicle when they're only about 190 meters away. Then they'll be able to execute that final approach, begin driving in slowly towards the hatch, or the docking port on the Poisk module, also known as Mini Research Module 2. That final approach rate will slow all the way down to about 1/10 of a meter per second, so it'll be a slow and steady crawl into that final docking port. But it's a slow and steady crawl. It's when you're bringing 2 spacecraft together, slow and steady always wins the race. But everything performing great with the vehicle so far. All of its checkouts done successfully, and all the navigation and that automated rendezvous control. So we'll start to listen in now as we continue to hear calls between Anatoli, Ivanishin, the Soyuz commander, and the flight controllers over in Koryov as the Soyuz spacecraft begins its approach.
Дальность 3, скорость 8,1.
The range is 3 and the rate is 8.1 meters per second. Copy.
Ожидаем третий импульс сближения.
We are standing by for the third approach burn. We are standing by as well.
Дальность 2,7, скорость 8.
The range is 2.7 and the rate is 8. Copy.
Дальность 2,5, скорость 8.
The range is 2.5 and the rate is 8. We can see the maneuver. The station has moved to the right, practically at 90 degrees. Copy, Irkutsk.
Наблюдаем разворот для выдачи третьего импульса.
Maneuver is confirmed as well. We can see it as well.
Getting a live view of sunrise as the station 271 statute miles over the South Pacific about to cross the terminator, that line between night and day on the Earth's surface. The Soyuz spacecraft coming up on 2 kilometers away and closing, right now at about 7.5 meters per second.
We have a combined GSO in attitude at 16:42:11, SKD activated at 16:42:17, 1.5 meters, 2 meters, 3 parameters of schedule are nominal. 4, we have observed the schedule deactivation. And the oxygen supply. So the burn delta V is 5.06 meters per second. Copy.
Wow. Мы сейчас картинку не получаем.
We are not receiving the image right now. Could you please provide the running commentary?
Дальность 1,6, скорость 4.
The range is 1.6, the rate is 4. Copy.
So you're continuing to get those good call-outs from Anatoli Ivanishin. He's giving the range and the range rate. So they're about 1.6 kilometers away from station, closing in at about 4 meters per second right now. That range rate is going to continue to drop. We'll eventually hit 0 after we do the fly around and hit station keeping. And then the Soyuz will begin its final approach, coming in at a rate of about 1/10 of a meter per second. The Soyuz is right now executing a couple of final burns known as impulse burns. These are quick firings of the engines just to continue fine-tuning that path.
Copy.
To just get a confirmation from the visiting vehicle officer that the impulse 4 burn was done successfully. The impulse 5 burn should be coming up in about a minute. It will be a 5 and a 6. And then that will place the Soyuz just about 400 meters away from the station. Then it's going to execute a fly around, going from underneath the station up to the top, looking back down, as it's going to be eventually docking to that space-facing side of the station itself.
The range is 1.2, the rate is 3.8.
And getting our first look now, this view from the Soyuz looking up at the station. As it starts to catch a little bit more sunlight, that'll firmly come into view. The numbers to really pay attention to, down in the bottom left corner, that top one you can see 1.099 kilometers. That's the range away from the station. Just beneath that, the meters per second, that's the closure rate. So right now we're closing at about 3.5 meters per second.
The range is 1 kilometer and the rate 3.4. DPO activation is confirmed and the braking is in progress. Copy. So the range is 900 meters and the rate is 2.5 meters per second. Copy. The range is 840, 840, and the rate is 2.3. Copy. The range is 800, the rate is 2.2, the braking is complete. Vanya, could you please use AGC mode? Stand by. The range is 750 and the rate is 2.2.
So inside 750 meters, and another good confirmation impulse 5 burn has been done successfully.
4806, I am sending AGC command. Do you want me to do it again? Yes, let's do it again. And again? Well, maybe one more. Now let's leave it like that. So the range is 660 and the rate is 2.2. Copy.
And there we have a great view of the Soyuz MS-16 continuing its approach to the station.
Yeah, let us,
this is a camera looking from the bottom down back towards planet Earth. Soyuz is going to continue to approach at this angle and eventually execute a fly-around maneuver once it gets about 400 meters away from the station.
Copy. Yes, let's leave it like that, Ivan. The range is 600, the rate is 1.4. Copy. We're standing by for the close distance approach. And we are standing by for proximity ops.
And the visiting vehicle officer here in Houston confirming Impulse 6 is done. That's the 6th and final impulse burn, just fine-tuning and beginning to break the Soyuz approach to the station. Next milestone is going to be that fly around once it gets to about 400 meters away.
So the range is 520, the rate is 1.4.
It's just 120 meters to go, and then they'll start executing that fly around. That'll essentially be about a half loop from the bottom of the station all the way up to the top side, where Soyuz will eventually orient itself with the docking probe pointing back down towards Earth as it moves in on the space-facing side docking port known as Poisk, or the Mini Research Module 2.
The range is 460, the rate is 1.3. Copy. The range is 420 and the rate is 1.2. Copy.
And again, we're coming up on that 400 meter point, and then right after that we should hear the beginning of fly around.
The range is 400 and the rate is 1.1. Fly around is confirmed. Copy. Fly around.
And confirmation the fly around has begun.
Yes,
so we're going to see the Soyuz spacecraft begin to swing its way from the bottom over top of the International Space Station.
The range is 370. The rate is 1.1. Copy. The range is 350 and the rate is 0.8. The range is 330 and the rate is 0.9. The range is 310. The rate is 0.75. Copy. The range is 300. The rate is 0.75. The range is 280 meters and the rate is 0.63. Copy.
You're just now tuning in. You are looking at the Soyuz MS-16 spacecraft. 3 crew members on board, NASA's Chris Cassidy and Roscosmos cosmonauts Anatoli, Ivanishin, and Vagner. They're in what's known as the fly-around right now. They closed into 400 meters away from the station. They're still getting a little bit closer, but primarily this maneuver is done to bring the Soyuz from the bottom of the station up to the top. It's all in the name. It's the fly around. That'll eventually line it up with its docking port known as the Poisk module. And once it finishes this fly around, we'll enter into a period of what's known as station keeping. That gives a chance for the automated system on board the Soyuz to finish fine-tuning that alignment before they begin the final approach.
250 meters is the range and 05 is the rate. Copy. The range is 240 meters and the rate is 0.4. The range is 235 meters and the rate is 0.36. Copy. The range is 230 meters and the rate is 0.25.
метров 0,2.
220 meters is the range, and the rate is 0.2. Copy.
This camera from the very forward end of the Soyuz keeping the station right in the middle of its crosshairs. And this actually giving us a really good view of its eventual docking port. If you look just above the middle of the crosshairs on that center line, it's perfectly splitting the Russian segment of the station right now. To the left is the Piers docking compartment with the 74 Progress vehicle currently docked. And just to the right is that empty Poisk docking port. That's pointing back into space. It's on the zenith side of the Zvezda service module, and that is where this Soyuz is bound. So it's going to continue this pirouette around the station until it has that Poisk right in its crosshair. We'll begin the station keeping so it can fine-tune its alignment, and then we'll begin the final approach.
метров 0,1.
210 meters is the range, and the rate is 0.1. Copy.
метров 0,1.
The range is 209 meters, and the rate is 0.1.
метров 0,7.
The closing range is 208 meters, and the rate is 0.7.
метров 0,05.
The range is 206 meters, and the rate is 0.05. Copy.
метра 0,04.
The range is 204 meters, and the rate is 0.04.
метра 0,07.
So at this point, the Soyuz has changed its angle of attack to the station by about 60 degrees. This entire maneuver is going to change it about 123 degrees, so not a full 180 from one side to the other, as it did approach the station at a bit of an oblique angle. But by the time it's done with this fly around, it will be right over top of that Poisk module, looking straight back down. Seeing a couple of thruster firings as it continues to fine-tune in this fly-around maneuver. Right now maintaining a distance of about 200 meters as it begins this roughly half circle over top of the station. Right now both vehicles flying over the northern part of South America, right over Colombia, about to cross over the border between Colombia and Venezuela, and then eventually moving out over the Caribbean. Again, this entire operation right now being done automatically. An automated rendezvous system on the Soyuz, the cores communicating with antennas back on the station itself.
Range rate 0.1.
Приняли.
Copy. Range is 200.
Thanks to plenty of sunlight, getting a lot of views there. The thruster firings as the Soyuz continues to fine-tune.
Range is 200 meters. Range rate is 0.08.
Принято.
Copy.
Причал курса.
And approach flag is confirmed
Причал курса.
for course. 200 meters is the range. Range rate is 0.02.
Заканчиваем выход на ось.
We are completing the docking interface access. Copy.
Иркут, АК-15 сейчас у вас горит?
0.1 is the current range rate. Come again.
АК-15 сейчас горит.
And the LED is on. Yes, approach flag just illuminated, and we are currently aligned with the docking interface access. Okay. Okay, please send approach command. Copy all. Command will be executed 17:02:32. This is the time when approach command was sent. Approach flag is set on both vehicles. Copy.
И также действие по 63-й странице.
Please move to page 63. Periscope illumination and headlight. Headlight is on. Copy.
So things moving very rapidly. We completed that fly around, immediately went into station keeping, and then they gave the go to resume the final approach early. So we are looking like we'll probably beat that docking time that was targeted at 9:16 a.m. Central, 10:16 a.m. Eastern, 14:16 GMT. As of right now, the Soyuz spacecraft on final approach.
Range is 170, and range rate is inaudible. Range is 153. Range rate is 0.85. Range is 140. Range rate is 0.85. Range is 130 and range rate is 0.7. Copy.
120, скорость 0,7.
Range is 120, range rate 0.7. 110 and range rate 0.5.
Can you see it? Yeah, I can see it.
Yes, I can see it. This is Chris. Range is 100, range rate 0.55. Copy.
So the Soyuz now just about 100 meters away from docking. That range rate continuing to tick down. Right now they're closing about a half a meter per second. That's going to go all the way down to about 0.1 meters per second when they get real close to that final approach. We'll see the contact and capture the docking probe on the very front end of the Soyuz spacecraft. We'll make contact with the docking port of the Poisk module. And once that's been grabbed, it'll retract the docking probe. That'll pull the Soyuz in closer. And then a series of hooks will be able to engage to give a hard mate, or really a hard latch, to the Soyuz spacecraft, firmly attaching it to the International Space Station.
Range is 70, range rate 0.34. And we can clearly see the target and crosshairs are aligned. Copy. Range is 60 and range rate is 0.27. Range is 50 and range rate is 0.2. Copy. And stand by for SSVP docking and internal transfer system command activation. Standing by. I confirm SSVP docking and internal transfer command activation. Probe is extended, latch is extended, hooks open, SSVP system is ready. Copy all. Range is 40, range rate 15.
A little under 50 meters to go. The MS-16 spacecraft, Chris, Cassidy, Anatoli, Ivanishin, and Ivan Vagner closing in on that Poisk docking module. Just minutes away now from docking.
Range is 35, range rate 15. Visually, approximately 25 meters. Range rate 0.1.
And in this view, the top of the Soyuz is really on the bottom. You can see that docking probe. It's the pointy part right at the tip. And that's what's going to drive into the docking port on the Poisk module. That'll get retracted, and that'll be able to pull the Soyuz spacecraft in. And a series of hooks around that ring just outside the docking probe will be able to engage and get a hard lock, firmly attaching the Soyuz to the International Space Station. That'll also create a airtight seal between the Soyuz and the International Space Station. And after that, it will create an area known as the vestibule. That's the area of both the Soyuz hatch and the station hatch, typically exposed to the vacuum of space. They'll be able to pressurize that and then kick off a series of leak checks. It does take a little while for that to not only get pressurized, but to make sure that the hatch or the pressure is equalized between the Soyuz, the vestibule, and the station itself. So it takes about 2 hours. Just you don't want to open up those hatches until you know for sure you don't have any leaks, and it can be actually pretty difficult to get them open if you have any pressure differentials. So they wait for everything to settle out before they open the hatches. Typically takes about 2 hours following docking. Now though, inside 30 meters, continuing to close in on Poisk.
Визуально 15.
15 meters visually, rate 0.1.
Визуально 10 метров.
10 meters,
Скорость 0,1.
rate is 0.1.
Визуально 8 метров.
8 meters approximately, range rate is 0.1.
Визуально 6 метров.
6 meters,
Визуально 3 метра.
range visual estimate is 3 meters.
Принято.
Copy.
Ожидаем касания.
Contact. Standing by for contact.
Есть касание, есть подвод, есть.
Contact confirmed. Hooks engaged at 17:13:21. Copy.
And docking confirmed, 9:13 a.m. Central Time, 10:13 a.m. Eastern Time, 14:13 GMT, as the station was flying just about 260 statute miles over the northern Atlantic. Soyuz MS-16 spacecraft docked to the International Space Station. Right now, the docking probe is going to begin to retract. It's going to pull it in, and the hooks are going to start to drive on both the station and on the docking port, the Poisk module.
Please select SSVP docking and internal transfer system display on input 2 control panel.
But with that, Chris Cassidy, Anatoli, Ivanishin, and Ivan Vagner's voyage to the International Space Station is complete. They've arrived.
This is the hooks engaged time.
17:13:20.
17:13:21. 17:13:21. Well, probe extension, inaudible. Illumination, LED is not illuminated on the info control panel. Okay. Yes, it's not illuminated. KDU parameters, let's check that. 118 and 228. These are the readings for spherical tanks 1 and 2, which are nominal. 476. This is the current propellant reading. Copy all. We have noted down all your reports. Please switch to page 67. Copy all. Page 67. Send an R7 command to deactivate the headlight. And I will close RPV 1 airflow regulator 1. It is now closed. Command is ready. Yes, let's deactivate the headlight. And please turn on the R7.
And so with the Soyuz spacecraft now docked to the International Space Station, at the moment of that docking, the station goes into what's known as free drift, so not under any active attitude control, and that way you're not going to accidentally impart loads into the Soyuz or the docking port if the station starts to maneuver. The Soyuz hooks will close first. It takes a couple of minutes following docking, and then following that, the hooks on the Mini Research Module 2 or the Poisk module will then close, and then the space station will once again resume attitude control. That being done right now on the Russian segment using the thrusters on the service module.
The MV pressure gauge. So what's the pressure reading? Okay, let's...
But again, just in case you missed it, the docking did occur at 9:13 a.m. Central Time, 10:13 a.m. Eastern, 14:13 GMT, with the station and the Soyuz flying 260 statute miles over the northern Atlantic.
When you're ready, we'll be ready to copy all the measurements in table 9-1. Moscow, we copied your last. Moscow, this is Irkut 2, 1740. SR pressure is 847, bore pressure 826, and assembly compartment pressure is 832. And we cannot measure such pressure using MV pressure gauge. That's too high for that. Okay, copy. And the LED for electrical connectors is illuminated. Hooks open is not illuminated. Standing by for hooks closed LED. Irkut, we have a recommendation for you. Please send G4 command at 1720. Come again. What is the time? 1720. Please send G4 command at that time. Okay, copy. We're going to send G4 command at 1720. And hooks are closed now. Copy. And what did you say about MV pressure gauge? Its measurement range does not allow us to use it to measure SR descent module pressure.
And we heard the call, and we just got confirmation here in Houston that the hooks on the Soyuz side have been closed. Now standing by for the hooks on the Poisk side, so on the station side, to close. And then we'll have what's known as hard dock, or really just a firm mate of the Soyuz spacecraft to the station.
And
looking like those hooks are now driving.
Well, you're going to use any control panel. Okay.
So once those hooks are done driving, they'll be able to re-enable the attitude control on the space station. It's able to stay in free drift for quite a while before it would begin to drift out of its attitude. Then after that, we'll enter into what's known as the post-docking procedures. The crew will kick off a series of leak checks on the Soyuz modules and then between the hatches of the Soyuz and the station itself. This will also be the opportunity for Cassidy, Ivanishin, and Vagner to get out of their Sokol engine entry suits that they've been wearing since several hours prior to launch. And it typically takes about 2 hours following the docking for the hatches to be open. Right now we were tracking the hatch open to take place at about 11:15 a.m. Central, 12:15 p.m. Eastern, 16:15 GMT.
This is Irkut 1, and the latches are retracted at 17:21. Copy. Moscow at 17:21:50. Probe is retracted and SSVP mode has been executed. Copy all. We will deactivate SSVP mode. Copy. I'm sending the 8 command to deactivate SSVP dock and an internal transfer system at 17:22.
And we just got confirmation that the hooks have now closed on the MRM-2, the Poisk module. So we now have a hard dock of the Soyuz spacecraft to the International Space Station. For Cassidy, Ivanishin, and Vagner, this is going to kick off a couple of hours of leak checks, getting out of those suits and getting ready to open up the hatch and join the Expedition 62 crew of Mir Morgan and Skropochka on board the International Space Station. So while they go through those leak checks, we are going to take a quick break, but we will be back in time for that hatch opening. So we're going to pick our coverage back up in just about 2 hours from now. We'll be back on the air at 11 a.m. Central, 12 p.m. Eastern, 1600 GMT. The hatch should be open. We have 11:30 on here, but we did dock a little bit early, and we are tracking that hatch open to come around 11:15 or so. But we will obviously keep you updated as we step through those procedures. And then after all of our stuff is done today, we'll be doing a video file here on NASA TV, just showing you all the best views, which there were many for the docking, and we'll be sure to have many during the hatch opening, and that coming up at 2 p.m. Central Time, 3 p.m. Eastern. So successful docking, one more box checked. Our next one will be getting the hatches open, seeing the faces of these 3 crew members as they make their way onto the station, and they're home for the next 6 months in low Earth orbit. So thanks for joining for the docking station. That's our second one of 3 for the day. And we'll be back with hatch opening in just a little while. So stick around, tune back in soon. For now, we'll go ahead and sign off. This is Mission Control Houston.